What's up, gangsters? How about another installment of the foil adventure with the 1/48 scale Eduard P51D? Not a lot to say as far as preamble goes. Let's just get right into it and see where it's at. Okay, here we go. It's been a couple of weeks since I filmed the last segment, and I thought I would just show you guys a brief clip so that you can see where I'm at. Basically, I just made the decision to try and work through all of the hard stuff first. And I think that is going to prove to be a rule for doing foil. Yeah, some of these pieces I knew were going to be difficult, but some of them were far more difficult than I expected, and some of the pieces that I thought would be a little easier proved to be really difficult. And you can kind of see the results. So, just to give you an idea, I've got 38 pieces of foil on here, and close as I can remember, that took around 60 tries. So my success ratio is something like, just a bit over half, maybe 60%, I don't know. Specifically, like this one right here, that took 3 tries, and you can see I still didn't get it quite right. I just gave up and decided to leave that tear. Same thing on the bottom, I got it on there without any tears. And then I did better when I flipped it over to this side. I also decided to start everything on the starboard side because I feel like most of the photography is going to take place from the port side, so I want this side to look better. So on this one, I got both of these wing root pieces down in one try, but there is a slight tear you can see towards the front of that wing root piece. It's just pretty slight, and I'll talk about what I'm going to do about those here in a second. These pieces around the horizontal stabilizer roots were really tough. I mean, this one back here in the back, that was easy. That was a one-shot deal. These other three pieces, those were pretty tough. And the failures were because of tearing when I got into the area right around the join there. And what I basically had to do was make it, and this is the same thing here, is a top and a bottom piece, and just attempt to disguise the joint or minimize the joint between the two. On the real thing, this is a welded joint. I believe it's 2 separate pieces on this one. But at any rate, there is a joint there. It's just a question of whether or not I can make it look good. I tried to do this piece here that goes over the fillet and does this adjacent panel on both sides as one piece. And I figured out pretty quickly that I was not going to get it clear up into the corner of the fillet. I'm going to try to do that as a separate, as another piece. We'll see. Again, even with 12 to 15% elongation, it gets tough to stretch these pieces to where they work. And again, you can see I've got some tears. This side looks pretty rough. The other side looks better, but still not great. And again, I have not done any finishing work to speak of on most of this. I've experimented a little bit, and I'll show you some of that here in a second, but this is basically what I've got laid down. And I'm at the point where I feel like it's about to start going downhill in terms of effort, because everything that I have left is mostly just simple curvatures, if not, nearly flat. You can see I started on some of the easier ones on this side, just to see how that would work out with the harder foil, because most of what I've done has been with the thick Reynolds kitchen foil that's dead soft, because I just didn't have any choice. There was absolutely no way I was going to get the harder foil to conform to anything like that. I learned that pretty quickly, and so I'm just having to live with that basically and hope for the best. This is the most complex surface that I've gotten the harder stuff onto. I was able to do that, and it turned out pretty good. And I chose to do the dull side out on that one. But it's going to be, it's going to be a mixture. I still don't know yet if I'm really going to like the way this all turns out, if I'm going to feel like it's worth it on something like this. I feel like this is probably the most difficult thing that you could foil at 1/48 scale. And I don't think there's any reason to even consider doing it at a smaller scale. It's just, there just would be no way to get into these. If I were ever going to do a Mustang for real, I would definitely do it at 1/32. Okay, so speaking of the type of foil I'm using, I also have made another change. I've said a couple of times that I don't think that spraying the glue on really offers that much of an advantage, and I don't think it does in terms of surface finish. But what it does definitely make a difference for is time savings, because I went ahead and sprayed glue on a bunch of foil, and I'm storing it on the non-stick backing paper, and that's a massive time savings of not having to prepare a new piece of foil for each panel, because this way I can just cut one off and go to work, and that's really nice when I keep failing and it takes 3 or 4 or 6 tries to get one down. So in those places where it's not gonna, it's not working, or I'm just over it and I'm not gonna keep trying, and I've got these little tears, so what am I gonna do? So that is, that's just gonna be, do something that hopefully minimizes it or hides it and hope for the best. And I think it's going to be okay. I've got a few places where I've already experimented with that. Like you can see down inside this nook right here by the scoop, I had a big tear there, and I just basically went and wicked some MRP Super Silver, my go-to aluminum paint, in there, or maybe it was actually this SMS. This is new stuff I got from these guys. Same, basically same. It's just a thin aluminum lacquer that I can kind of wick in there with a small paintbrush. And for all practical purposes, if you didn't know it was there, you wouldn't know it was there. Now, you might immediately say, well, if the paint's good enough to do that, then why are you bothering with foil? And that's a fair question, but we know the answer. When this is on the entire thing, it definitely looks like paint. So that's my plan to get through this thing, because honestly, I just want to be done with this stupid thing. And there's just a point where I just have to keep moving forward. As far as putting the foil on, I've kind of, I'm refining my technique. It's getting better, but it really kind of still just comes down to the same operation of, pushing the foil around and progressively stretching it as gently as possible. I'm still using, my favorite little toothpick right here, but I've also started using this silicone brush a little bit. And that's working pretty good. I dip it in IPA to give it a little bit of lubricity and make it a little easier to move around. And it's it's okay. It works good in places like this, like these wing root pieces. Another thing that I'm using, and this has really come in handy, this is a neat little tool that I got from my dentist. Went and got my teeth cleaned a couple weeks ago, and I asked him if he had anything cool for me, and he gave me this thing. And this really is a burnisher. I guess they use this for certain, doing certain types of fillings. Anyway, this round polished surface is, steel, so it's plenty hard and it's smooth, and it's proven to be pretty helpful. And here's one way that I'm using it. There's enough glue underneath this foil that you get a little bit of a padding effect. And sometimes if you have a defect, like here's one right here that you can see. Look at the left edge of that panel, that sort of wedge-shaped panel right there. You can see on the left-hand side of it that there's a little bit of a scratch or a gouge right there. And those are difficult to avoid. And so what I'm doing is when I get one of those, I take this sort of little spoon thing, and if I can do this without my optivisor on, maybe, and just start burnishing across it. The fact that the steel spoon is harder than the aluminum will knock off, like if it's an actual scratch, it'll knock off the sharp edges of the scratch and kind of help fill in the flaw. If it's just a sort of a gouge that's more about the soft glue underneath than an actual scratch, you know, sometimes if you just push it around enough, you'll smooth it out. And so you kind of get this effect right here, if you can see that. So at a minimum, it sort of disguises the area that's got the flaw in it, and you can actually work that out. It works a lot better on the dead soft aluminum than it does on the hard stuff. And part of that is because the dead soft stuff is thicker, but also just because it is so soft, you can actually move it around with this much harder steel tool. So that's been helpful. I haven't really done much else. I did do a little bit of sanding and finishing on this area right here because it just looked so horrible, and I wanted to see how much I could improve it. And one thing that I have been trying based on somebody's suggestion is a little bit of 4/0 steel wool, and that works pretty good because, again, the steel is quite a bit harder than the aluminum, and it'll do a pretty good job of burnishing it without leaving any really very visible sanding marks. Because, you know, the fact is that until you start getting down, you know, around 1500 grit or finer, you're going to have sanding marks, and any sanding mark that you can see at scale, especially at 1/48 scale, is too big. It's over scale, because the real thing might get sanded with the same sanding material, and obviously that's not going to show. So that's a challenge. Some of these pieces I'm going to just leave them as they are and hope that it ends up looking good. Like I'm using the chrome, the chromier, shinier side of the thick foil right here, and I'm using the dull side of it on these pieces that have to have more manipulation because, you know I'm probably going to come back and work on those using some of these different techniques later. So we'll see. The other thing that's just super maddening, like really driving me crazy, making me almost want to quit, is dealing with open edges getting peeled up. And that's a real problem, like along here, because this is a wrestling match, and I am, just like a barbarian, pawing on this thing, trying to get a good grip on it so that I can get in there with my toothpick or do whatever it is that I've got to do to smash the foil into a particular area. And it's hard to just, pay attention to every single thing. And so what'll happen is my thumb is over here and I'm holding on to this, and when I pull my hand away, this edge right here has started to lift. And if you're not careful, it'll keep happening and it'll eventually just break off, and you'll end up with a little spot, like you can see it right there. That little triangular spot in the corner of that piece just straight up broke off. And now I've got another little place where I'm probably going to have to use a little paint because I just don't want to redo that entire thing. These edges of these two sections right here have been really difficult. What I've basically gone to doing is putting a lot of super glue, of extra thin super glue along that edge, and that works pretty well to hold it down. And in places like right here, I've used super glue all the way around the edge of that joint, and then gone back with debonder to clean it off and hope that enough stays in there that it keeps it stuck down. So anyway, you know, that's just kind of what this has turned into, is a situation of do what I can, accept that it's not going to be great, and just hope for the best. And so now I'm going to move on to hopefully some easier work with these other panels, and then we'll come back later and see how that all goes. Okay, so here it is, 2 weeks later, and as you can see, I have made a lot of progress, I guess. Certainly many more square millimeters are covered, but yeah, this is an exercise in managing my distaste, because I mostly loathe this thing right now. It's just frustrating. And it's not just the finish. I mean, you can see, you know, there's, I've been, again, having to switch back and forth between the different foils. So these pieces are the hard foil here. This is a piece of the thicker, softer foil. And, you know, you can see that, like, there's some texture showing through even on this thicker foil. Hopefully that'll show correctly on camera. It gets a little confused with these bright reflections that we love from the aluminum. But you can see that. I mean, it's not terrible, but it's obviously, the whole point to this was to not have texture. But again, none of this has got any finishing work done on it yet. You can also see, like, trying to mash this down into the rivets. That results in a lot of you know, whatever you want to call it, disturbances of the surface. And it, you know, it's natural looking, it's realistic looking, but doesn't look good, so I got to deal with that. But the thing that's really just driving me batty, you can see it right here, like on this thing, all the handling, making that edge peel up. I can't count the number of times that I've mashed that back down. I've super glued it. And it's just so vulnerable right there on the edge that it's making me feel like I might even redo that one section, but I really don't want to, because that piece right there is one of the most difficult ones on the whole fuselage, and I'm just super tired of it. So I don't want to do that. Same thing here around the edges of the radiator outlet. That's been a real tough one. It's gotten kind of torn up, and that's really dissatisfying. But yeah, I'm probably not gonna change it. Because again, I'm just really, really, really over it, and I just keep reminding myself that this is a mule and it doesn't have to be perfect. It's never gonna be perfect. And yes, this is what I mean when I say that I'm having to manage my distaste. I have to have a lot of these conversations with myself about this thing. And I'm tired of talking about it. See, like that right there, that little bit flipped over, and I was able to flip it back, but now it looks like shit. So what's going to happen there is that when I install said radiator scoop, okay, so yeah, anyway, that's going to be in there about like that. And what I'll do is just drizzle some super glue into that joint, and then cover that with some. I'll put some aluminum paint in there. I think that's probably all I'm going to do. It's on the bottom, and like I keep saying, I'm just tired of it. But I don't really want to do that yet, because then this edge is going to be really vulnerable, because I'm going to cover this whole piece with foil. So yeah, anyway, yeah, that's kind of how that's going. There's another one of these that just happened. This is a fresh piece. You can see right there in that corner where it peeled up. This is the thing that has proven to be, honestly, the most irritating and frustrating of everything I've encountered on this little journey, that I didn't even see coming. I didn't even think about that. But you know, same thing along this edge. It's just, yeah, super, super annoying. I've got one right here at the front that keeps wanting to come up. And with the softer foil, you can pretty much mash it back down an infinite number of times, and it's fine. But with the harder foil, there's a limit, and as you saw around the edges of the opening for the scoop, eventually it'll just break off because it's harder. So anyway, yeah, there's that. And then, so you can see I've still got to do the tip of the vertical stabilizer. I think I can probably do that in 2 pieces. I was going to punt and just paint it, but I think I can probably do it just like I did this corner in the fillet right here, where I've got a piece on each side, and the seam between the two is right there on the leading edge, and it's impossible to see. So I think I can probably do that up here as well. I'll probably wait and do it last. Then there's this area around the tailwheel door, which that's a little irritating that I have to deal with these doors. I mean, it's fine. I get why Eduard engineered it that way. It's not wrong, but yeah, how to do that is kind of a challenge. I might just punt and paint that when I'm painting the other things, because I am definitely going to have to paint some areas, specifically this panel right here, because of that joint right there with the wing sub-assembly is going to have to get painted. It is what it is. I accepted that a long time ago. I am probably going to paint the everything around the windscreen, not only because difficult to foil, but I also am not super confident in foil staying on the canopy frame forever. And last thing I want is to look at this thing a year from now after all this work and see some of the foil lifting up then, which very well could happen. But also because this gets painted green from about right down here all the way up to the nose with the anti-glare panel. So that's that. Now, speaking of painting things green and other colors, you can see I'm going to shift gears. This is going to be the last video for a while. Not a year like the last time, but I am going to shift gears. I'm going to do some painting and enjoy that, and maybe work on a different kit for a while. I also still have to foil all of these, but this is kind of the inventory of all the pieces that have yet to be worked on. And so I'm just kind of getting geared up to put primer on all of them and put the landing gear together and all that. But I also decided to do a little bit of testing. Didn't feel like it was too presumptuous at this point to do that. And one thing that I really wanted to investigate was this thing with the Eduard decals. And if you have been living under a rock and are not familiar with the situation, Eduard's new decals, and by new, apparently, as I understand it, it's anything July 2020 or newer. Now, you'll get different people saying different things, and there's contradictory evidence, but whatever. The bottom line is that they went to digital printing to be able to do it themselves. And there's some plus and minuses with that. The color fidelity is not maybe as great as silk screening with some of them. Like, you'll see some dithering in the halftones, which is kind of uncool. But overall, they seem to be pretty good decals. They're really thin, at least they are on this sheet. They seem to behave nicely. The reports, it's a weird deal. It's all over the map. I honestly, I love Eduard. I love what they're trying to do, even though I get irritated with them sometimes with their fit and engineering, and especially with their resin stuff. This decal thing, though, it really kind of is, in my opinion, is a real misstep on their part, because the deal is that you're supposed to be able to apply the decal and peel the clear film off of it and leave the colored part, and it really looks like it's painted on. You see that dithering in the halftones a lot more when the film is gone than you do when the film is on there. But anyway, here's the thing. It's not clear if this ability to peel the film off is a good thing or a bad thing, if it's intentional or accidental. Eduard has not ever they don't put it anywhere in the instruction sheet, the method for doing this, but they did talk about it in their monthly newsletter a couple of years ago. I mean, that's about as official an endorsement as you can get, in my opinion. But they continue to maintain that it's your choice, it's whatever, it's not really designed that way, it's a happy accident, you can take advantage of it if you want to. Anyway, it's just not, I just don't feel like it's been well handled, and it kind of makes these a bad product in my opinion. Because some people have really good luck with these things as normal decals. Some people have bad luck with them, they don't like the film, they think it shows too much. Some people have good luck peeling the film. Some people have bad luck. So again, it's, I feel like anytime you have a product that's supposed to be pretty predictable and half of people love it and half of people hate it, that it's not a good product. That's just my position. But I wanted to try the film peeling thing. Now, the application method is very specific. You're supposed to put the decal on the surface on top of decal solvent or softener of your choice. And this is a really key point. I normally do not put any decal softener on the surface first, because as soon as it starts working, you can't move the decal around. And in my decal water, I keep 10 or 20% microset, because it's basically vinegar. Vinegar in water is a surfactant, and it makes the decals move around a little bit easier. And so I don't ever feel the need to put decal softener underneath decals. The exception is when I'm doing stencils, because they're just so small and so prone to silvering, that I use Mr. Mark Setter for those. Let me grab that. Hold on. I like it because it is a combination of a decal softener, solvent, and an adhesive. And I love it. It works really, really good for tiny little stencils. So I thought, well, it would be perfect for this, because what you're supposed to do is stick the decal on there. And again, I'm doing it directly on the paint, just like I always do. No gloss coat necessary. You're supposed to stick the decal on the surface. Let it dry. Recommendation is for anywhere from 2 to 24 hours. Doesn't seem to make much difference. And then you're supposed to be able to grab the corner of the film with your tweezers and just peel the clear film off, leaving nothing but the colored part. And when it works, it really is beautiful. It totally looks painted on. Several guys, like Shane Doak, he's a great modeler. He's been doing it really successfully, and they really do look painted on. But not everybody has had equal luck with that peeling method, and I did not either. I'll talk about that here in a second. In fact, let me just show you. So I did that. I did peel it off. I did try to peel it off on this decal, and it was just not successful. I waited 24 hours, and I just couldn't get it to come off uniformly. It would come off in little slivers and shreds, and I spent like 15 minutes and had like 10% of it done, maybe not even that much. And I finally just gave up and went to method number 2, which is much easier. And this is a method that has been going around the internet for longer than these decals have been a thing. It works with some decals, not with others. And that is that you take mineral spirits, 100% mineral spirits straight from the hardware store. Don't use something like that says enamel thinners on it, because as I say over and over again, that has other stuff in it that keeps them from calling it 100% mineral spirits. And that is often stuff like xylene, which is really hot and which will give you a bad time. I mean, if you've got paint there, xylene will definitely fuck it up for you. So you want just regular standard mineral spirits. This is my brush cleaning mineral spirits. You get a Q-tip and you soak it in mineral spirits like that. And I think I can probably do this directly on the decal sheet and you'll see what happens here. So you just start scrubbing and you can see it right there. That clear film just starts to come right up. Obviously, you wouldn't really want to do it on the decal sheet because you need it, but you can see it right there. See how easily that dissolved? So on the surface of the model, super easy. And if you've got any paint other than enamel, this should cause no damage to your paint. So especially if you're using lacquers, but it'd be fine even with acrylics. So that lets you scrub that clear film off, and when you're done, this result right here is what you get. And you can see this is absolutely fantastic. I mean, that's at least as good as painted on. And with that red outline, I mean, you'd have a hard time masking that and really making it look as tight as that is. So that is fantastic news for anybody who wants to do a bare metal finish, whether it's painted or foil, because, you know, as we know, that clear film shows up way more on a bare metal finish than it does on a painted finish. And you know, the methods that you use to minimize that, you know, which are all involve putting clear coats on top of the decals, is something that you really don't want to have to do on a bare metal finish, at least in my view. So I think this is fantastic news. Now, that implies that you're going to leave this now unprotected with any kind of clear coat on top of it. And that is exactly what I'm saying. Some people have said that when you do this, that the decal ink is just way too fragile to leave it there without a clear coat. And again, this is part of what's irritating and frustrating about these decals, is that the story is just not consistent. Because, you know, like there's a guy on Facebook right now who's made several posts about this, and he's clearly a good model maker. He's got his shit together, and he insists that you absolutely must clear coat over the colored part that's left. Well, I don't really think that the difference is that these are on foil and his are on paint. But here, I just dug this Q-tip back out of the trash can with all of its mineral spirits still on it. And I can go over here and I can rub the shit out of this thing and it's not going anywhere. I even did this yesterday with some IPA. Okay, now it is barely starting to shift. You can see kind of in the corners there, it finally started to give it up. That's actually kind of a cool chipping effect. Kind of a little bit of weathering there. Maybe that's a technique. Anyway, I even did it with IPA. They didn't shift. I've rubbed on it with my finger. You know, my nasty, disgusting finger oil didn't take it off. So I don't know. I think it's just one of those things that you're just going to have to experiment with But right now, this is like the best news that I've gotten in this entire foil adventure, because that solves a major issue with getting markings on this thing, because I was going to try to paint the big markings and then figure out how to deal with the small stuff like the stencils. It's not going to have any squadron code because it's going to be an aircraft that's brand new out of the factory. But, you know, still, you got stencils. And I was just like, okay, well, maybe I was going to buy like HGW makes a genuine wet transfer decal like I used on my Spitfires a couple of years ago. I was going to probably end up going that route, but this is even better. So that is really good news. You know, you may find that the straight just grabbing the film and peeling it off with your tweezers works for you. If it does, cool. But I think even if it does work, that this doing it with mineral spirits is just far easier. So that's great news. Now the next thing is I am going to have to do some painting. It's going to be pretty minimal because what I'm going to do on this silly thing is, I don't know, this may be lame, but I figure that even, you know, these versions that are included in the decal sheet, they were brand new at the factory at some point and had nothing but, you know, the serial number, the insignia, and the anti-glare panel on the nose and the stencils, and that's it. So my plan is to use the decals, as I showed you here, for the insignia, use the decal for the serial number and the stencils, and then paint the anti-glare panel on the nose. And that should be the only paint that I have to actually put on top of the aluminum. But that also is a matter of concern because, as a rule, aluminum does not like paint. Or paint does not like aluminum, whatever. It's a mutually toxic relationship. They don't get along, and that's why you have primers like zinc chromate that were invented to try and solve that problem. So I've done some experimentation. As I told you guys before, one thing I wanted to try to do was etch the aluminum using this aluminum wheel cleaner that's got muriatic acid in it, because that'll take the oxide off and it gives you a kind of a dull finish. I showed you guys that. So here it is. So what I wanted to do was try a little test sample that had the etch process done to it, that had just some sanding done to it, and then a section that had both. So that's what we've got here. Etched with the wheel cleaner, etched and sanded, just sanded. Then I wanted to try it to see if primer helped. So I've got primer underneath this stripe here at the bottom, but otherwise both of these have got just nothing but MRP olive drab sprayed on it, and here we are live on camera finna find out if I can peel this masking tape off without lifting any of the paint. So let's just go for it and see what happens. So of course I'm going to peel correctly, you know, parallel to the surface and away from the paint line as much as possible. And yeah, you know, so far I'm feeling pretty happy. That pleases me greatly because there is a little bit of chipping at the edge. You can just, yeah, hopefully you can see it. Little bit of chipping right there at the edge, but otherwise really not too bad. Let's try the other piece and see if we get away with it on both sides. This is, honestly, this is going better than expected. There's a guy doing a P38, and he was doing some of this with his foil, and he was having really bad luck with paint chipping. But again, I really maintain that peeling your tape correctly is super important. If you didn't know that was a thing, there you go. So there's that. And one thing that I have found that's also good news is that the adhesive on the foil tends to be stronger than the adhesive on the masking tape. I mean, the foil is a bitch to get off of there. So that's good. That's a good result. There's not any chipping on that edge, so that's a great result. This had nothing but the etch process done to it on that stripe. So I wanted to specifically do that there because these are the harder foil samples, and as you can see, quite a bit shinier. This one's been polished, believe it or not, even though it looks pretty nubbly. Anyway, so there's that. Now let's go over here. This is an older piece of standard soft foil, not the super thick stuff that I have now, but thicker than just standard kitchen foil. So, and when I masked the edge of the primer area and then peeled that tape off later, there was some noticeable chipping along the edge of the primer. So, I don't know what we're going to find with this when I peel it off, but we're finna find out. And I'm going to just, let's be a little less correct with this piece of tape and just yank it. There we go. That's how you're not supposed to yank tape. But look, it went pretty well. Now, I should say that on this, that edge is along a panel line, and that's always better because the panel line represents a break in the paint or a place where the paint's naturally going to break, and you'll typically get a good separation there. This one, though, I very purposefully masked right down the middle of the panel. So let's see what happens there. And let's take note of each section. So the etched section first. It's coming off pretty well. Doesn't seem to be causing a problem. Okay, now etched and sanded. Doing good. Now sanded only, and I sanded it with 800 grit, so not super aggressive. Same thing I would sand the primer with before I painted that. So look, this is good. This is a good result. You can see a little bit of the jaggedy along there. Not great. Seems to be kind of the same amount along the entire length of the panel. Some of that may just be flakes. Now, I don't know. You can see, now that I've rubbed on it a little bit, you can see it better. So that's not great. I feel like that it looks best where I used the wheel cleaner to etch that. It's not great. Now, what I could have done to guarantee that this did not happen is run a blade along the edge of the tape. That provides that break in the paint, and that's kind of the that's kind of the real correct way to make sure that doesn't happen. But I wanted to see how it did just all on its own, and you can kind of see what's happening there. So anyway, that's that. I think that's a pretty solid experiment with good results. I'm happy with all that. And I think that's going to be about it for Mustang videos for a while. Okay, so there you go. I hope that you found that informative. I mean, if you're interested in doing the foil thing at all, I really feel like that this video and the one previous to it are really kind of the deal with with this whole adventure. I think this is what now, episode number 11, which is pretty ridiculous. But it's been a long and interesting journey, and I feel like I've definitely learned a lot. Again, I still don't know if I'm going to end up loving this, if I'm going to feel like this is all worth the squeeze. We'll see. But at any rate, if you've kept up with it and you've enjoyed it, I appreciate that. And as always, much love.